All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Avionics Education. Bruce Bessette here. Today, we're going to talk about a question that I got from an A&P mechanic asking about if it's worthwhile to be a 145 repair station. Welcome, aviation enthusiasts and dreamers. If we haven't met before, my name is Bruce Bessette. I am an expert in all things airplanes. I'm a 40-year survivor in the aviation industry. I teach avionics, maintenance, aircraft ownership, and FAA regulations. I teach both online and in classrooms. My students come from high schools, colleges, repair stations, and the FAA Academy. So let's start a conversation and shed some light on this wild world of aviation. Right now I'm running my video and I got to stop it here for a second. Okay, I want to keep on going, so bear with me. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We're going to talk about FAR Part 145 repair station, something that I have a lot of experience in doing certifications, but today I don't want to take all the thunder. I want to go through and kind of share the stage with a friend of mine. He's a person that I've been dealing with since 1996. He is a FAA inspector, retired, like myself, and he also got into the FAA, and then he's also teaches with me at the FAA Academy. One of the classes we teach is FAR Part 145 certification, and then we both were principal inspectors for it. So I'm going to go ahead and send him up here, and then Jose, you can take yourself. And Jose,
all right.
You're on.
Hi, everyone. It's the first time I'm kind of doing this, so bear with me. But yeah, I'm excited here, probably like you all, to figure out some questions that Bruce has. Bruce does a... Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
You're doing great.
But anyway, Bruce does a great job with training, avionics education. I deal with Bruce on that. I've known Bruce for a few years, like he said. Well, yeah, we've kind of been around the block a little bit related to that. So
you mean the gray hair?
Gray hair,
really
yeah,
gray hair.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is that we're going to put our vast experience together and kind of double team a question. So the setup here is that, I'll refer you to the video. The setup here is that it came in on Messenger, which was interesting, and I'm hoping that he chimed in right now, and it doesn't look like he's with us. Jose, I sent you a link to see if you could jump on the channel. Okay, so the situation here is I have an individual who's a certified airframe and power plant mechanic. He does not have the time yet to be a IA. So he is actually a freelance mechanic working out of his truck. He said in his letter to me that he mostly gets requests for IA work. So there was plenty of GA work in the area, and he lives 2 hours in any direction from a major maintenance hub. He's in the great northwest, if you will, the left coast, if you will. So his problem is that he is getting requests to do annuals, and he's wondering, can he do annuals as a repair station at Part 145? And he's told me he wants to put it up in his home field. And we'll talk about the actual individual questions when we get to it. So between that and talking about the regulations that we'll pull up here, it's a common question. A lot of people don't want to move to the crappy cities that aircraft maintenance is done. You know, I always, working for the airlines, I worked for America West and Southwest. And as an aircraft mechanic, I always had to live in the crappy cities, you know. But I grew up in Phoenix, so I just kind of benefit that I lived in Phoenix. But we look at all the pilots that would get on the airplanes, and they would be flying away to their home fields on beaches, so they only had to commute to work once a week. But a lot of people like to get into corporate and general aviation to live close to home, and really then also live closer to, the pay. The pay is lower, but then again, it's actually pretty good with the cost of living in these smaller towns. So I get a lot of questions about being a 145 in general. In fact, both Jose and I do consulting. I did consulting. In fact, I just did a consult session about 2 weeks ago from a guy who bought a repair station. We'll talk about the pluses and minuses of that. So, so Jose, tell us about your experience with repair stations, and
Well,
you worked at a FISDO, right?
yeah, I was at the Fresno FISDO. That was my first assignment was there. I was involved with the geographic inspector for SkyWest Airlines and SkyWest Airlines. I mean, SkyWest Airlines and Trans-State Airlines. And so I was,
This is actually the first
I
time
mean,
I've ever seen him short for words.
I, I'm hearing the delay. I guess
Oh,
I
shut
need
off
to,
your speaker. Yeah, you shut off your speaker
yeah,
to your YouTube page there.
yeah.
You're watching how the sausage is made, folks. So, well, like I said,
Hold on, let me,
I've been doing the online training, and then there we go. And I'm gonna go ahead and shallow up my screen here a little bit.
yeah, no kidding, right?
Get out of my screen. There we are. Welcome back. Okay. I'm going to go right into the first question. We talked about this. Short answer was yes. I want to do an annual inspection on an aircraft is one is going to be based on the make, model, airplane you want to do. As Jose did, you were a big help this afternoon. I was teaching, so he got to do this checklist. You have to have the tools and equipment in performing the task, which means everything you need to have as a tool and equipment outside of standard tools. We all assume we have standard toolbox, right? We learned in A&P school what a standard toolbox was. But if I have the calibrated equipment and any other, if I could do the grease on it, the grease gun equipment, anything I need to do for an annual based on the tools equipment for that aircraft, therefore, I could go through and do an annual. Okay. I do not need a one. I don't. Yeah, you're laughing at me, but it's true. Again, checklist and inspection technical data used. The interesting part there is that in a 145, you could use a standard checklist in Appendix B. I forgot it now. Appendix B. Yeah, Appendix B or Appendix A. Is it Appendix A? I've been doing a repair and alteration courses, so repair and alteration is also Appendix B or Appendix A of Part 43. So you need to have the data, right? Trained and qualified personnel. So the question came from an individual who wanted to be his own repair station, but he didn't have the time. And obviously, if you didn't have the time to be an IA, you would not be approved by the FAA to do annuals if it was just you alone, right? So you would have to work with an IA for an X amount of years, work a repair station that does annuals, or be an IA long enough for the FAA to get it. So there's no shortcut from an IA to a 145. Okay, if it's you alone. Now, if you hire and mechanic IA, then your position in the company changes, your title changes, but you couldn't do the work, but you'd have to hire somebody who had that IA experience. Then, when you sign it off for the document, we sign off for the repair station. So then let Jose jump in. Your microphone's muted again there, guy. So what do you mean by forms? What do you mean by forms?
I'm on the delay. I hear the YouTube channel because it's live and I'm on Zoom.
Yeah,
So I'm hearing two things at one time here, and it makes it very difficult to.
Yeah, this is the problem. The problem is right now, because of the delay, you're focusing on the YouTube channel. You need to turn that volume completely down on YouTube, and only listen to Zoom. Zoom is the problem. Is Zoom has shanghaied my camera, so
Right.
so that is our only source is Zoom. That was a good question. What about any operative equipment that needs to be deferred? Can the repair station or does the owner operator have to defer it? Now can you hear me?
How about now?
Now I hear you perfectly because I'm listening on Zoom.
Okay, so I didn't allow the YouTube thing, so now
Yeah,
I can hear you, but I cannot follow the YouTube as you move the slides.
It's okay because there's a time delay because you can't see the main screen. But
Okay,
on
so what forms I'm talking about in documents is based on the repair station's manual.
okay, so the forms
So
that you create that they created as
that
part of
they
this,
create
yeah,
exactly as to how they're going to do the work, whatever it is that they're involved with. And if they're doing work for, if there's a 135 operator, they're going to follow that air carrier's manual, obviously. So it depends. In this case, because it's just a straight 145, we're looking at what forms are they creating in their 145 to get all the documents, travelers, anything related to what's involved, for their ratings, what they're rated for.
and we're talking about if he's asking for one rating, I want to do annuals. I'm already a mechanic, so based on your mechanic experience, you could do anything, right? You get an airframe, but if you don't have the experience enough to do annuals, you've never done it before, the FAA is
Right.
not going to let you.
Right. And you can't fill out an 8130-3 or an annual inspection. It's not, you can't do that for an airplane. You have to make a logbook entry, and how are you going to make that logbook entry? Maybe he has his own form as to how he's going to do that. That becomes something they put in the logbook.
Right, and then that'll be just remember I mentioned procedures. So
Right.
you're
That's a
in the
procedure.
in the procedure manual have a copy of that form, what
That's
it looks
correct.
like, and then in your procedures also we talk about the addition of a quality step.
That's
Because
correct.
when I'm an IA, I by myself, I don't have somebody inspecting for me. But remember, I have the separate action of being a mechanic, and then I'm doing the inspection as an IA when I'm doing it by myself.
That's correct.
In a
But
repair
by
station,
regulation, you have to do the annual inspection.
yeah, I can't delegate to anybody else.
That's correct.
So you have to have an inspection department that's doing those inspections. Your mechanic will be prepping the airplane and then doing the servicing. It usually is done with an annual, but that IA is acting on behalf as a quality member, a
That's
QC
correct.
member of
That's
the
correct.
airline. So
That's
cool.
correct.
So and then the other thing is the aircraft being its type, design, data plate. That's an interesting point because brings us to another question. Can I use my 145 certificate on home built airplanes?
Well, and that depends on the ratings. If they got 91, 411, 413, and the guy wants to do pedostatic testing, yeah, he can do that. In the interest of safety, there's a legal interpretation to allow them to do that. But as far as meeting that type design for an amateur build, there's none. So even grandma can work on the airplane. There's no procedure related to that. And that's just straight amateur build.
Right.
When you're dealing with light sport, that's a different ballgame. Now you have to deal with consensus standards. And that ties in, according to the rule 91-327, that ties the light sport airplanes into 43.
Exactly. So when you talk about 91, 411, 413, that's actually not really maintenance. That's a certification.
That's a certification.
Yeah. So the FAA says somebody who holds that rating, a certification for transponder cert and altitude correlation, okay, the FAA would be more than happy to let anybody do that. Absolutely.
Right.
But if I'm repairing an aircraft, it's got to be a type certificated aircraft to meet an airworthy standard.
Right.
Experimental aircraft are no longer airworthy.
And sometimes the confusion comes into play. Well, it's an inspection. So therefore, there should be a logbook entry under 4311. No, that's not true, because when you look under 91-411 Appendix E or 91-413 Appendix F, it tells you make a logbook entry under 43.9. That's it. There's no 4311 needed, even though it's an inspection. It's more or less a certification, which there's legal interpretation saying FAA may use the term inspection. It didn't mean it to encompass everything. There's different latitudes on that.
Absolutely. And that's what we're talking about when we say, we'll get to the next question here in a second, but when we talk about, specialties of a repair station, it can be as simple as a limited specialized service, which
Right.
which is, if my 91-411 goes past 24 months, is the aircraft considered unairworthy? No, it's an operational issue.
Right.
Another limited specialized service might be NDT testing. Okay, so another repair station or an airline could send components out for NDT testing, and then they'll get a work order, a serviceable tag, or a serviceable document from the limited specialized service stating I have inspected this and found no cracks or whatever it is. So that's another type of repair station. Again, a lot of mom and pops. So that gets, I think, to the very next question. This is talking about directly to facilities. And we're going to come back to this. Now, 32 by 40, that's about a 182 size hangar. Because I think I had a 182. Okay. Yes, I could squeeze that bugger in the door and slam it, and I got it all in here. But there's other factors that you have to account for being in your facility. You have to protect that aircraft. Segregation of work. Any parts you take off the aircraft to facilitate maintenance, removing panels, taking engines off, things like that, those have to be segregated and put away in other parts of that hangar. Well, now your space just got smaller. You need to have handling of parts, travelers. You need to have separate departments. For example, where's your incoming receiving area? Okay, where do you? So you'll need to have that area quarantined out or designated out. We talk about quality control inspections departments. So you start getting into a situation on your facility. I start with a hangar, okay, but I need to designate places in the hangar. Now, in the AC 145-9, when it talks about writing that part of the manual and doing in there, you'll have to provide to the FAA written description of what your workspace is going to be. And another issue with the workspace is going to be human factors issues, safety issues, right? Is it heated? Is it cooled? Does it have a bathroom? That sort of thing.
Yeah, right.
Water, right? Can you clean? If I do engine overhaul or engine repair, do I have a run stand area? Or no fair just taking it out of the end of the runway going far. So the hangar size your airplane size will start coming down based on the fact that you need to provide room in your hangar for the rest of the functions of the repair station that you had to have.
Right, and the segregation, which is part of the requirements of the rule, that all has to be, how are you going to do this if you have two 182s in that you have work to do? Do you have the segregation? Do you have all of the parts? Do you have everything to protect against the environment? All of that needs to be considered in your work area, whatever that area is, in this case 32 by 40 hangar. So there's tagging of parts. You may have to remove parts to do certain works or whatever it is that you're doing per your ratings. In this case, it's an annual. You may have to take seats out, put them someplace around the hangar. Pretty soon your 32 by 40 hangar becomes a little bit crowded.
One other thing to consider. Once you get your repair station rating, you get it based on that'll become your work area. Your facility becomes part of your rating. Now you say, I want to go work out of my truck. Can I go through and I could do 100 series Cessnas in my hangar. Can I go over and go catch this King Air over here on the ramp with my D100? No.
It depends on what you're doing work away from, and I guess that's the next slide that you're going to talk about.
Well, the issue I was trying to say, it says here, exactly, talking about is mobile repair. If you are doing mobile repair under the repair station rating, okay, you can only work on aircraft you are rated to do.
That's right.
Now, what Jose was kind of allude to was talking about maybe line maintenance, right? But then again,
or he goes to a hangar, an owner's hangar, to do an annual inspection.
Right, and that becomes temporarily a work away from fixed location.
That's right.
When you go through the certification process with your FAA inspector, you're going to be asked about your ability to work away from your facility. What are you doing on your truck? And if you're going to be doing an install at a customer's hangar, which is allowed, right? As long as you notify the FAA, temporary fixed location, in your manual have a procedure for notifying the FAA. So again, added levels of difficulty a little bit. right?
Well,
If,
the question that comes into play is, what is temporary?
oh, big
So,
time.
what if he's been doing temporary for a couple of years now, 3 years? Uh, FAA is going to go back and say, I think you're temporary. You're moving your equipment and tools and all of this other into this temporary location. The minute that turns into a permanent thing, you better think about a satellite
Right.
or make it a standalone repair station doing something else.
And that happens too. You'll have somebody, a smaller repair station for lighter aircraft, and then they'll have a satellite for larger aircraft.
Yep, yep.
So,
And
so
I've seen that. Bruce and I have seen that in our career. So
yeah. So absolutely. And then all could have different ratings. But what happens is that temporary location, it becomes your repair station, which means, getting back to the previous slide, segregation of parts, material. You just can't go through and grab a hangar with 10 other people and set up
right,
a corner of it as, this is my place,
right,
mine.
right,
No
right,
more, you're not allowed to
right,
come here. No,
right,
that's
right.
like, not
And
happen.
Bruce mentioned line stations. Line stations is something that you have a rating to do air carrier work. It's limited for the airframe. Let's say it's the 737-500 model. You have a limited airframe for that make and model. Now, line stations is not a rating. It is nothing more than meeting the requirement of 145-205 so that you can do work for that air carrier based on contractual agreement. In this case, it's line stations. So he may do it at that air carrier's hangar, that make and model, and use that air carrier's facility to do a line station. That requires another op specs, a D107, that mentions the address of where that facility is going to be done for that line station. And you may have others lined up on that D107 op specs. That is authorization to do in compliance with 145-205 work for an air carrier.
Absolutely. Yep. Which takes us to our next question. And we've kind of covered this before. Do I need an IA on staff? And I would probably say, and Jose said this thing is, it's kind of an it depends. I need somebody who at least has IA experience, needs to be qualified under Part 65 to perform the work for the repair station. So part of the person who's doing a annual, which is an inspection, is working under the quality system in the repair station. Not required to have an IA. Just needs to be qualified to do the job. And then your FAA inspector will determine the qualifications. I worked at a 140 repair station with an airframe rating for the last 10 years or 5 years. It all depends on how the FAA is comfortable with that individual. Yep.
Right.
Let's see.
Well, the key factor is when you're doing work in relationship to Part 65, what certificate is returning the work back to service, the article back to service? Well, you have to go to 14 CFR 43.7. There are certain people that are allowed on 43.7 to return those articles of service. One of them is an AMP with an IA. Another one is a repair station. You have to figure out, what are we doing? As long as you're within the ratings of the 145 repair station, the 145 can bring it back into service under the 145 with the appropriate ratings.
Exactly.
So Bruce is doing annuals right now. So he's doing it under his IA, AMP IA, because he's listed in the 43.7 rule.
So
So
keep in
you got to
mind.
figure out how is this bouncing ball working?
Keep in mind also, if I'm doing, my repair station has nothing to do with the airframe. Like I say, if I'm doing propellers, or if I'm doing instrument, which requires for 91.411, I can't do that with my airframe. I can only do that with the limited radio rating, right? The instrument, the correlation check for the altimeter. My AMP don't mean nothing.
Right.
I have to be issued a repairman certificate because I still got to meet the skills, knowledge, and ability requirement to perform that job.
That's
that
correct.
certification. So, let's see here. Minimum number of certificated. like Jose he put the note in here. That's a FAA is going to give you this. Depends. What do you want to do? Jose and I have worked with shops or one person. We call them mom and pop because they're kind of low value for pointers for us. But I remember I had 63 repair stations, and mostly the reason why I have such a large number, I had a huge district, all of southern Arizona, and I was an avionics inspector, which means avionics inspectors, if it's an instrument or electrical or avionic type shop, it only had one FAA inspector. But if it was like an airframe rated shop or an accessory, they actually would have both A&P and an IA. So you would have two principals. And if it's an airline, you'd have three. So on and so forth. So, you could be one and two. I think the one that kind of comes to mind, he was doing nothing but slides. He was taking slides from 747s at Miranda. I remember it was outside of Tucson. And all he did is unpack the slides, clean them up, surface them, replace the batteries in the beacons, and packed them and sent them back over. One object, one item. He had a repair station for that.
Or you have other mom and pop that do magnetos, certain make and model of magnetos. That's all they do, all day long.
Well, my favorite guy, he did nothing but apparently for Gulfstream 3s. This model of Gulfstream 3 required a compass swing every 3 years using this piece of test equipment. He used to work for Collins. He was the engineer at Collins that made the equipment. And that was his job. That was his entire rating. He would go out and do compass swings. He had to have an instrument rating to be able to do the aircraft compass swing using this piece of test equipment that he eventually had to modify. And one person, one job. Now here's the joke about it. Same thing with 91-411. What facility do they need? Because you have to have a facility. You can't list your truck. The FAA is not going to go to your facility based on where's the license plate tag on the back of the truck. No, I need a physical location. And I've had people's bedrooms that were their repair station. I told them I would prefer the garage or something because, quite frankly, the handcuffs made me nervous. But so. See, I get in trouble for that statements. This is YouTube, so I could be a little bit blue, as you were. So yeah, set up size. But we get into the larger repair stations that actually deal with the airlines. Then you're talking about they'll have their own training department. They'll have their own HR people. They'll have their own. They'll deal with they'll have, I forgot the name of who the people come in before the airline comes in. Planners, maintenance planners. So you're going to have a lot of people. You can have 500-600 people doing repair stations for airlines to one person. So if you want to do just annuals, you could theoretically do in a couple make and models, one person. Because the FAA says, and this is true too. I had this question before, and I'll ask Jose that if you've had this question. I have one hangar. It's big enough to house one airplane. But I have 3 open work orders. Can I just park the other airplanes outside while I have an open work order? He's laughing. And go.
Well, again, it depends on the situation as to what is involved with. The minute he cracks open the airplane and exposes it in the elements, there better be some kind of protection related to what's going on with what he's doing. If it's just parked outside waiting for the cycle of one to finish and moving the other one in and stuff like that, that may be fine. But the minute you're opening airplane areas where they're exposed to elements, it changes the ballgame. Sometimes people put portable tents as a means of protection, and that may be okay depending on what's involved.
So exactly, and this is true. My first year in the FAA, my very first inspection was because right after ValueJet, we went down to a repair station in southern Arizona, and they were doing C-checks outside on a ValueJet airplane in monsoon season. So they tried to say, what was the big deal? We watched the thunderstorm flood water into the open doors and panels of this airplane. That's no bueno.
Yep.
So
Yep.
now, but with the same situation up in Phoenix, we had another repair station was also doing C checks outside. However, they were allowed to do it under a shade cover. So, and the other thing talked about control of the ramp. If I was going to pull an airplane out of the facility and it needs to wait for a part to come in or something like that, they would require control of the ramp because the ramp still needs to protect that airplane. And it really,
Right.
at that point, it came down to the security of the airport. If I had an airport that had gates and things like that, you could pretty much safely keep an airplane outside, doors, windows sealed up, closed up, and allow an aircraft to wait for further maintenance just outside the facility. That's fine. Again, that's an it depends questions. So,
And it depends also on the contract too, because you would think that common sense will prevail in relationship to the repair stations. It has the airplane in their area, whatever that area is, and they're doing work, and all of a sudden, payment stops. Well, guess what? The repair station says, "Hey, you didn't pay me. Put that airplane out there near the grass area, exposed to the elements, and let this thing go through a decomposing situation here." That is not good, and that turns into some lawsuits. Who's responsible for that aircraft? That repair station was. He negates his responsibility because of payment. Is that in the contract? That's where sometimes it turns into a situation where the FAA doesn't necessarily get involved, but it turns into liability where people are suing a repair station because they didn't fulfill their contract. All of these things a repair station should be aware of.
yeah,
I've seen that.
yeah, these are not things that the FAA is going to tell you. These are things that, like when Jose and I do certifications or do consulting, excuse me, we would go through and kind of say, hey, you may want to have, for example, a pre-hangar inspection. Because how many times have people called the FAA and said, this guy's working on my airplane and he broke it?
Yep.
You know, no. I did this pre-inspection. In other words, I made sure to find out what was working and what wasn't working before I brought it into my hangar. So there's a lot of this legal stuff you have to deal with. Now, the benefits, but let's finish the questions. We'll get back to the pros and cons or whether you really need one. So we go down here, minimum number of people. Okay, component repair. This is a great one for Stratix Group, who's online right now. And also, I love this. Ducks Tapes Unicycle. One of these days, I want to have you explain that. I'm looking at the chats, Jose.
Okay.
Can you,
So who do we have? Steinex they sell parts? Is that what
yeah,
they do?
Stratix Group. You sell avionics, you say there. It's possible to get it. He says it's possible to get a stripped down 145, nothing but on it. And that's what this is here. The next question is, what about component repair? Again, that gets back to the ratings you want. Well, I don't need a hangar now. I need maybe just a building, right? Because I'm only doing a component part. But all the other requirements remain the same. Trained, qualified personnel, approved data for it, tools and equipment required for repair of the component now. I had an operation that did APUs. And the APUs then, they had to have data from the manufacturer. Original manufacturer was Allied Signal. They had to have the manufacturer's instructions for continued airworthiness, access to their tools to be able to repair this APU for airlines stuff. So let me see. I'm going to read what else you say here, Jose. Go ahead.
Well, here's the other thing to think about when you're dealing with parts or components in this case, like what's involved, like that company that's dealing with parts. If you're getting parts and you're doing work for them, doing work like overhauling these components or avionics equipment, whatever it is, that's fine. You're going to stick on an 8130-3, you're going to certify it, verify whatever it is. But if you're acting as a broker for parts, then you don't need a 145 repair station. Because there's a rule, 145-217 Charlie, that talks about repair stations that are nothing more than, returning articles of service without doing actual work. That's not a 145. You can actually pull the 145 certificate because of that. They're in violation of that rule.
Yeah, it's
So
specific.
it's very specific. You need to be very clear. What is it that you really want to do if you're going to be a parts broker per se?
Yeah, you can't like the one of the worst egregious events that we've seen is, and I won't say who it is or anything else. I had into a situation to where the main repair station, for whatever reason, didn't want to pay the people anymore, right? So they wanted to go through and sell it to another company. So, but what they did is they sold the tools, the equipment, the data, the facilities, the main repair station to a separate company who became now non-certificated maintenance provider for the airline. And the problem with the situation is that when the original repair station sold everything they needed to hold the ratings and got rid of the people, so they all got hired by the new company because they just simply were no longer working. And then all of a sudden they maintained those items still on their capabilities list, component list. That's a paper repair station. That
Yep,
is,
and that's a violation of 145-217 Charlie.
because what can happen? If the FAA discovers that you are a paper repair station, it's the potential is that every one of the parts that was returned to service is now what we call a SUP, a suspected unapproved part, which means they're illegal to be installed in aircraft. So
Yeah, because there's no approved data. How did you get the approved data to do whatever you're doing as a non-certificated person?
yeah, that trust me, you'll see that later on.
Yeah, so the rule 145-217, A talks about the, certified repair station. B talks about a certificated repair station and procedures related to that, which goes back to the quality system that Bruce talked about. And 145-217 Charlie talks about if you're just returning to service without doing any work, there's a problem.
And
And
this
that
is yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
and there's a violation pending right now because of that with a engine manufacturer. I won't that will remain nameless, but they're involved with this as well, and they have a 145 repair station to do overhauls of that engine, and they're not. Okay, so be
Very
as it
good.
is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's supposed to be a big deal because that's what they hammer us on the FA. So now, getting back to the question that Stranix Group had, is that you're a salesman, okay? Unless you could specifically fill out an 8130. In other words, are you rebuild and repair as necessary? I'm sorry. Are you repaired and replaced as necessary? Are you rebuilding the part? Are you remanufacturing the part? Because there's always certain things that you could put on an 8130. The one thing you're not allowed to do, and this happens all the time, and both Jose and I have seen this, especially on eBay, removed in serviceable condition. It worked fine when I pulled it off the wrecked airplane. I wiped the blood off the front, and here you go. No, that is an unapproved part. And yet we'll have repair stations that will get a 145 somehow. They usually, like, quote unquote, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, will buy one. Or the other situation, I saw a repair station that only was a repair station in other words, they had their certificate on the wall for 411, 413 check. That was it. But they sold themselves as a component repair station. So they were filling out 8130s as repair for transponders in this case. But in reality, nobody bothered to read the certificates. And it said 91, 411, 413 only. They did not have a rating for repair at all. Every one of those parts is a SUP. And remember, keep in mind, if it's on an air carrier aircraft, we talk about what the FAA can do. To an air carrier, Part 121, it is $11,000 fine every time the airplane leaves the ground. So you do the math. Something that's been on the airplane for a year, a couple hundred flights, maybe 10 flights a day for a year. So it's a big deal. The FAA is supposed to be on it. Okay.
But more importantly, going a little bit what Bruce is saying, where's the audits from the air carrier? They're supposed to be looking exactly what they provided as contract maintenance for this 145. and the 145 sends it to another subcontractor without their knowing, that is where the auditors for the air carrier, they're responsible for the airworthiness of that aircraft, period.
Yep.
They need to know, and sometimes they're not told.
Or they don't want to know.
That's
All
true,
right.
or they don't want to know.
So now, let's see. I'm going to check let's see, take a look and see what we have here. Statics group. Any other questions out there? Then I want to go to another question that talked about, you guys are pretty quiet out here. Another question I want to actually was somebody said, and I don't know what it is for your area, but for Arizona, California, Texas, to get a new application for a 145 certificate, you're looking at 6 months to a year and a half is what I'm hearing. Here in Texas, it's almost a year to get an FAA inspector to start looking at it. In other words, to start the passing process. Somebody asked a question on when I announced the class, well, what if I just buy one? Can I buy a repair station? And the book answer, Jose, is...
You sure can.
Well, it depends.
And it depends because what were the ratings of that repair station you purchased? If it was 91, 411, 413, and that's all they did as a repair station, and the guy wants to work on airframes now, okay, the FAA is going to want to put him back in certification because he's going to have to fill out another application. They're going to look at the ratings. They're going to look at the tools, the tech data, qualified personnel, everything related to that, because he's now in a whole different realm than what that original certification was for that 145 repair station. So you may kind of circumvent the process from a year to maybe 3 months, 4 months, but it depends as to what they want to do with that 145. I've seen them where they buy 145s and they don't even buy the assets of it. They're buying the certificate, but then they go ahead and resubmit the application for a whole different rating.
And that does, the FAA is not supposed to let that happen. Our issue is
right.
A couple of things. First, one, if you're going to change a location on a repair station, get past the purchasing issue. I need to move my repair station, to another hangar, another part of town. Okay, that's a 30-day notice to the FAA to get started, the process. Because when you're moving, the FAA is going to look at you. Remember, we're talking about buying a repair station, which means you have an FAA inspector assigned. Okay, that's probably a big plus for purchasing one, is that you already have an FAA inspector assigned. Okay, so, but the chances of you keeping that inspector, nope, it's gone. You can't guarantee that. So the other problem that you have is that you could do it. The answer is yes. If you are buying it as the president and you say, I want to buy this repair station, okay, but you keep the facilities, the tools, the equipment, and the personnel, the FAA is not going to think twice about it. Right. That's not a key personnel that's going to trigger any special inspection.
Right. And normally they do that with a contract agreement up to a certain time, 6 months, because these people that are part of the repair station are going to be training the new people, so the transition is a little bit easier. So, yeah, I've seen it exactly what Bruce has said. That's usually what happens when you purchase a repair station. You pull all the assets, you purchase everything related to that, as well as the personnel, and the personnel are there trained to coordinate with the new people. And sometimes these older people that are on there are still the accountable manager coordinating with the FAA, because they have that rapport until the transition, they pass the baton to the new owners or the new accountable manager, and now the FAA makes all sure that all of that is okay.
And the other thing that we're looking out for during transition of a facility location is how are you going to close your work orders at the old location and open your work orders at the new location? We got to make sure that continuity of maintenance is maintained on the products. The FAA wants to see those parts returned to service properly. So they just coordinate.
Sometimes the process stops and they do this transition, however long that takes, or they continue during that transition. And that's where the FAA wants to know, how do you maintain continuity during this transition?
Right. Now, if you leave and buy this poor guy, um, I had a consult with him about a couple weeks ago. I said, and he paid $5,000 for a manual, and he got the manual, but he didn't get the op specs, and he didn't even have a certificate. And the accountable manager said, "I'm solid with the FAA inspector. Just no problem. Let it do it. He'll just take care of you." And of course, the accountable manager would never come out. He said, you can't tomorrow call the accountable manager and say, meet with the FAA. Oh no, he never comes out. And I say, you got a problem. And and then the other problem he had, the FAA inspector said, lose my number. Okay, so he lost his quote FAA inspector. That was an up and up, right up scam. I told him, you've been scammed.
Yeah.
Because that's the danger you have, because the backlog for FAR 145 repair stations is so high right now, especially small ones. Large ones seem to get big attention, but small ones
and certifications is a low priority for the FAA. So yeah, it can take up to 6 months to a year and a half to get your certification done.
Okay, I'm just taking a look at the chat here, guys. Hold on. It says here, hey, remote AMT. Bruce, I just realized I was home. Okay, that's nothing. I'm the rogue mechanic. I love it. So, I initially said, when Jose and I first got on last night to kind of check, I've never actually done a guest shot on an OBS broadcast. So this is fun. We're gonna have more funs with it. So it answers your question. Yes, you can purchase one, but it's definitely a buyer beware. You should, it was good for him I felt sorry for him. I only charged him a couple $100, but he had me for like 4 hours. I just basically then told him, you got ripped off. If you don't have the op specs, they're not signed, you don't have the certificate, I don't even know what rating you have. You've got manuals that are not even for the location that you want to put in. So, and it's also the issue about FAA inspectors, both because Jose and I are both kind of out of loops. We have to be careful here, but we teach them the book answer, right? But we can't go through and tell them yes or no, you're doing this right, you're doing this wrong. FAA inspectors have a lot of leeway on what they allow one operator to do versus what another operator to do. And the reason for that, and this is a large portion of it, is one, the available amount of money a repair station has, and the quality of the people. If I got one repair station that's financially solid, right, and they have really good, experienced people, and everybody's happy, I'm going to probably give them more leeway in their manual to allow them to do things that I would not allow a repair station that hires every kid out of A&P school who's also broke all the time. So those people have a tendency to where I'm going to put more checks and balances in their manual, because they need to be, basically, when you hire a new person from school, it's okay as an A&P. There's got to be more checks and balance in the process. So you never want to get in this argument between, well, my FAA lets me do this, why do you make me do that? And that's because the FAA has written the rules to where they are scalable. So that's the reason why it's important to work with your FAA inspector to convince them that you can do what you're supposed to do. And there was one other thing Jose was going to talk on that same vein. Oh, I ran into one situation. I was teaching a 145 class, and apparently I was only supposed to teach the manual, their manual. He was mad that I taught them the rule. In other words, when you hire me or Jose to teach your 145 for you, I teach you how to review your own manual to see if it's in compliance. Well, he, of course, said, well, IFA doesn't have a problem with them. They came in, never said anything. And what it was is they got brand new inspectors. Usually your first visit especially now in COVID, is just basically make sure the address is still good, right? So they don't do it. Just because an FAA inspector comes into your facility and walks out and doesn't say anything to you, it doesn't mean you're legal. The acronym I said is that Just because you went 150 miles an hour in a school zone and the crossing guard didn't give you a ticket doesn't make you legal. You're dangerous, right? Something's going to happen eventually. I mean, but the point is, ultimately, the person who makes the application and gets the certificate is ultimately responsible for the compliance with the rule, no matter the rule. So you could get a new inspector, and there's a lot of them coming around. I think, Jose, we were told they just hired 550 new inspectors in the last year.
Brand new ones. And a lot of them don't have the experience level that Bruce and I are talking about. So they go out and do a surveillance on your facility. They may take it for your they may take several days to finish what they need to finish. They keep going back and forth to their office to review certain things because they're still trying to understand how all of this process works. Yeah. There's a lot to it. This is why when Bruce and I do consulting and we go out and do an inspection prior to FAA going and do your facility, we do it like the FAA would do it. Usually take 2 days, but we do a thorough inspection. And you're going to get all the squawks. So understand that.
And your responsibility to fix them. If you
that's right.
If you ask us to help you, so that's the benefit of hiring us, is that the FAA is not allowed to run your business for you. They cannot tell you, even no matter how much you beg, cajole, bribe, whatever it takes. Right?
Yeah, they can't do it. Obligation legally, they can't do it. They'll get sued. Yeah. Whereas consultants like Bruce and I, we can write you up, tell you everything related to what's involved, and we can turn around and help you with a corrective action that's necessary to help your facility, whatever.
Right.
Let me bring up another real point here. We're talking about annual inspections for this 145 repair station. If this IA, let's say there's an IA in the picture here. I know the whole thing was predicated without an IA, but I want to turn a little spin on this and put an IA in the facility. He's got to do 4 annuals every year. So he's working for the 145, The repair station will sign off the annual inspection under their certificate because they have the rating. But for the IA to gain credit for his IA for 4 annuals every year, he's going to have to use his certificate. And that's a little different. And you're going to hear some arguments on that. But I'm telling you, you got to go back to the rule. 43.7 says who's exercising their certificate and returning to service. If it's a 145 and they got the appropriate ratings, he's legal. But if it's an IA trying to get credit for an annual, he's got to use his certificate.
Yeah, and that means you're not operating within the umbrella of the 145. However,
that's right. You're on your own.
But you could show actively engaged in aviation. It just means you have to take the 8 hours training. That's all.
Yeah, you can do that too. Yeah.
Like I said, I stay actively engaged because I do annuals. Now I do a heck of a lot more than 4 because I went back into turning wrenches again. But the issue is for me and Jose. I don't do enough to keep my A current, so I still have to take the training courses and things like that. But in the end, the same thing with the people who are carrier. I don't know about Jose's state, but my state went through and they wanted to do a purge, and they tried to get out all the IAs that work for the airlines. They don't need them. You don't need to have an IA for the airline. You need RII issued by the airline for quality, but not an IA. So we had people in my office that tried to purge the records. No, if I'm working at an airline, I'm actively engaged. I take the 8-hour course. So I would definitely, if you got an IA, I would do everything I can to maintain, actively engaged in aviation. I can tell you right now, I never did enough 337s in 10 years. It's been much less 16 in a year. Because repair stations are doing the lion's shares of their major repair, major alterations. Like, for example, if I'm doing an annual inspection as an IA, and I find discrepancies, I, as an IA, am not going to be repairing it. I'm a mechanic. I'm limited to what I could do as a mechanic. So I'll send that work on a ferry permit to a repair station. Now, the benefit. So, to me, if I want to make money being an IA, well, an IA is a quality inspection. It's not a maintenance certificate. Okay, so therefore, I don't need a repair station to be an IA to perform its annuals. Okay, and then I use my A&P to do the add-on service that's not included in the annual. So people used to think that, because we did this all the time, changing the spark plugs, that is a maintenance function. However, because we take and do a compression check, that's an IA function. So what am I charging for? I'm charging separate for an IA, and I'm charging separate for my mechanic. I don't need a repair station for either of that. But if I want to make a little more money, right, and I want to have air carrier customers, I'm not talking about 121. I'm talking about 135s, corporates that run 135s. Therefore, then my customer base, one, ever tried to get money consistently out of a 172 owner? I don't recommend it. But to get money out of Mesa Air, Mesa Group, even doing components, then that's a great example to have in a 145, because it does increase your customer base. And especially if you're working in a city that doesn't have a lot of the big headaches, airlines will come and take your airplanes to you. But also keep in mind, it's a higher expense to become an air carrier maintenance provider, because there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through. But if it's about money. But the issue for me, and the initial question, what we showed up here for today, is that if I don't have an IA, can I be a 145 by yourself? The situation would be no, you have to wait until you can show that you're trained, knowledgeable, qualified to perform that function under the rating. Okay? So you need to get more experience. First experience you get, go ahead and get your IA rating. Once you get your IA rating, then you can open a repair station with a limited airframe and do annuals under the IA. Okay. Otherwise, if you're doing just repairs on an aircraft or changing propellers, changing engines, that sort of thing, you could do that from your vehicle. So that was because when we get back to the initial question, was for the person that chimed in, just a little bit too early yet for you. You need to get more experience. What else? You want to add to that, Jose?
No, you covered it, Bruce. Very good.
Okay, and then let me see. I'm going to go to the road. Any other questions for anybody else there? So, everybody being quiet. Oh, man, only an hour and 22 minutes. This has got to be a record. I usually yammer on a lot more.
Did you get to the elements of the repair station yet, or you're working your way to that?
No, we did all that at the first part.
Oh, okay.
So
so you covered, I think slide 10 is the one I was looking at.
Yeah, this was 10. It was beginning and end.
Okay.
So a couple of things that we probably should bring up to you all that, like I said, to create the manuals will probably take the most time, especially, and I got to say this very carefully. I don't want to insult anybody, but it's not about your abilities as a mechanic. It is your ability as an administrator of a 145 certificate. That is that where the FAA is going to be looking at. They're going to look at the technicians, the employees, as being trained and qualified, right? And they have tools and equipment, blah, blah, blah. But that's what they're going to look at, the people at trained and qualified. When we look at the accountable manager and the duties and responsibility, that's a key person. We look at the person who's going to act as a director of maintenance and the duties and responsibility for maintenance and the experience. That is a managerial administrative issue. So even before I want to start thinking about being a repair station, I got to start thinking about managing a repair station, which is a business. It's a business that's highly regulated in the aviation world. It's just the way it is. They got to be worthwhile. There's a whole lot of them out there. So, and people do want to hang on to them. They don't want to people surrendering certificates, it just doesn't happen. So sometimes it's possible to buy one, but it would be easier to transition into one and then maybe start your own after you learn about the managerial issue about it. Because it's easy to manage yourself, but I feel bad sometimes. When we were rewriting everybody in the new rules, they had to take time out of their life and their business to comply with the FAA rules. And that took a lot. Because they
whereas if you hire Bruce or I, we could help train you with that. And we sometimes get hired as an agent of service to speak on your behalf to the FAA.
Yeah, so the fact that we're both active in aviation because we both teach at the FAA Academy, so that nobody could question our credentials as an expert. We've used as subject matter experts. We've helped people at least with compliance and enforcement and things like that. Now, Jose is in California. I am in Texas. So, but if you want more training, I'm going to put in the links here it's just Avionics Education at Thinkific. And then Jose, I want to make sure I get your information. So if they contact you directly, but then we teach together for both Consolidated Aircraft Safety Systems, which is coming up in 135. It's now required in 121 air carriers. And then also, like I said, 145. So the best way to come up with a 145 is the guys to get together as a group, and then think of it as you're going to be starting a business. And that's what most people kind of miss out or don't understand so much, is that you have to think of it as a business first. And then you meet the regulatory requirements as you get certified. All right, and the chats have been all quiet. Have I got all the chats lined up? Yeah, that's it. Everybody's there.
Any questions out from the chat? Anybody got anything out there?
Come on. I don't know how many people are watching right now.
All right, I put my info in the chat.
Yep, it'll come up in a minute. Absolutely. So either here or now, and if there's nothing else going on, I'm totally tired. I've been talking all day. So Jose, I want to say thank you, Jose, for coming in. You're getting better at this, so the next time we do this, we'll have this down. Again, thank you to all the people that support the channel. Like I said, I'm actually officially monetized. So now that I've been monetized for almost 2 months, I almost made $20. So it never was about making money on YouTube. It was a goal I wanted to do. Now I'm trying to get more subscribers. So please, if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, share it with people that can like it and subscribe. Right now, I have probably reached more people through my YouTube channel. I got one video of all things of how to read a cannon plug part number with over 12,000 views. So,
I just saw the chat right now about the remote AMP. Because the AMP has changed. I'm smiling on that too as well, because there's a lot of changes on the 147 world, and Bruce knows exactly 147. So you got the expert right here that'll help you with that.
I sit there and imagine I'm looking at the changes to the rules, and I remember what it was like for me to teach when I was in an AMP, and I'd have my 25 squirrels. Now, under the new rule, okay, the squirrel could come up to the instructor and say, I know how to do this now. Pass me.
Right.
Okay, now I have to admit, I can't deny him. Okay, he knows how to do it. Because, yeah, quite frankly, most people could probably spend about half of the time in class and then could do it. So now I sign off and move on. Now my 25 squirrel. I still have 24 squirrels in front of me, who now I'll say, why does he get to go on? Pass me. So now what's going to happen after about 2 cycles of classes, I'm going to have, probably because I no longer have class limits on the sizes, I'm now going to have 50, 75 little curriculums going around. And everybody doing their own little school thing. And they say, test me. Let's see. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm an instructor. I'm supposed to follow a curriculum, teach the material before I allow you to go break my airplane. go out, show you how to do it first, watch you do it for a second time or a third time, then I'll give you a written test and I'll move you along. I have no idea how they think that we could send 100 people through a curriculum at their own pace, at a home pace. I only had enough magnetos for 6 people. How am I gonna do that? And then plus, first keep them in the building, lest they go into somebody's truck. And I kind of laughed. Why the frick would you steal a magneto? Do you even know what it does? I used to watch people steal some of our avionics. Hey, dude, man, I'm gonna put some heavy duty sound on that. You know, gotta remember. Hey, guys, VHF is AM. So, but anyway. Yeah, it's going to be a disaster. But I am not in the FAA, so I don't worry about it.
Anybody else got any questions out there?
He said, oh, military experience. Yeah. Yeah, the 147 process sounds like it's going to get insane. Well,
it is. You're right.
Well, the other issue is that they're not going to have enough instructors. They're already, they haven't upped the pay, but they sure have been putting out the applications. So stay tuned.
But not only that, the quality. The quality is going to be another nightmare.
Yeah, exactly.
The quality of the mechanics coming out of there are not like they used to be.
Which means you're going to have, and there was, when I left my school and then some of the other senior instructors went with me, what used to be operators coming to our facility saying they actually would give job offers to our students before they graduated, right? But then as soon as I left for a year, and it wasn't because of me, it was just because we had a change in management, they became off limits. Nobody would hire them. And because these people who hire with an expectation that I've got an AP, I know this, or I got trained in an avionics program, I know that, right? Now it could be anything. And now it puts the burden on the people who hire you to make sure you're not going to blow up my multi-million-dollar airplane. An avionics guy could cost $100,000 of just swapping the wrong box. So,
well, I've seen it where in a repair station that had avionics ratings, they crossed wires, they didn't splice properly. It was like a nightmare. Like, who in the heck taught these people how to do this work on avionics or electrical wires? It was a nightmare, seriously.
Absolutely. All right. This was fun. We're going to keep in mind, I need your suggestions for the subjects coming up. I'll bring Jose back on. We'll come up with other subjects for things that we talk about, especially FAA. I know that we had one suggestion. Go ahead.
And share Bruce's education's, avionics education thing. I'm telling you, not just because he's my friend, he does a good job in explaining a lot of things out there that you guys out there in the field have questions for. Just basic stuff. What is an avionics inspector? He covers that. What's all involved with an annual inspection? He covers that. There's very few. I know there's a lot of other venues out there that promote aviation training, but you got to look at the quality. You got, you pay for what you get is what you got to look at. So
yeah, no, I can't. And because of the way the FAA is right now, I cannot get any of my courses approved for IA renewal. Even though I'm working on one right now for how to fill out an FAA form 337, and then at the end it talks about doing a field approval stuff. You're supposed to be able to know how to do that as an IA. It's amazing how many IAs don't know how to do it. It's not a common thing that's done for most IAs. Most IAs.
Well, back in the day when Bruce and I were inspectors, that was one of the advisory circulars we used to do for IAs that were becoming new IAs in our district.
Yep.
So yeah, that was something that we covered on that.
I remember. I did a lot of field approvals too, so I was working on the other end, which means I read a lot of damn. So I'm hoping to get my DART for field approvals because I have that unique skill to do that. I just wish they would let a DAR take some of the certification load for repair stations, but We're not there yet, guys. All right. Well,
Yep.
an hour and a half. I thank you all for being on here. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you, Bruce, for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone out there. Appreciate everybody out there. Appreciate your chats.
Absolutely. And remember, this will be posted on the regular channel because you can always continue to make comments on it. In fact, I encourage you to make comments on it, and I'll forward them to Jose if Jose pays me enough, and then we'll go from there. So thank you. Merry Christmas, and be safe.
Yeah. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year for everyone.
All right.